We all have that one friend, the one who says exactly what's on their mind, no matter what. And that's Sheetal Mars.
That's right. Every week, my friends and I dive into whatever's on my mind: sports, politics, pop culture, even my own struggles, you name it. If I'm thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Unfiltered, unapologetic, and just a little dangerous. Get ready for the wild ride that is Sheetal Weapon. You've been warned.
Welcome back to Lethal Weapon. I don't know what episode this is. I'm being told that it's episode 8, which means that my ADHD brain has decided to stick with something more than 3 times as one of those few hobbies that I've not given up on immediately because it's too damn tedious. So I'm very excited. We made it to episode 8. I'm Lethal Sheethal. As you know, it's Biggie Trog. And we sit here, we talk about nothing and something and everything, and we have a little fun with it, or we don't. And we don't care. It'll happen when it happens. Last week we had a great conversation with Dr. D, who's just phenomenal. And this week we wanted to kind of relay where some of that was coming from. And I think everybody there's enough in healthcare to talk about why we're here and why this is. And Dr. D was kind enough to give his perspective on it. And I wanted to spend a little time on the patient perspective. I know several weeks ago we had the CEO of United Healthcare who got shot in the street, and everybody was kind of shocked that not one shocked that someone could be so brazen as to shoot someone literally in the middle of the street and just walk off, like, and not be arrested right then and there. But also that not so many people were sad. Not so many people were empathetic, or their heart didn't break at the idea of a, a, a man, a father, a business person losing his life. And that seems like, where are we as humans to be so desensitized as to go, yeah, that tracks. Like, that's literally the collective response from like, the American psyche, that a healthcare CEO gets shot in the middle of the street, and we all collectively go, yeah, that tracks. Like, he had it coming. And there's enough conspiracy out there, theories out there about why this happened, who the person was, that, like, what was his motivations. And I think we all kind of place our own motivations in the body of that young man who wielded the weapon. But at the end of the day, the reason why nobody is sad, or very few people are sad, and I'm sure his family is sad, his children is sad, um, is because they don't. A lot of us who have had to interact with the healthcare system, a lot of us who have had to interact with health insurance specifically, believe that that person was not innocent in his fate. He had some culpability. He was not an innocent bystander. He wasn't just some customer service guy doing his job. He literally set the policies, approved the policies, spearheaded the policies that prevented so many people from getting access to quality care, and denied people uh, so much access, and probably cost people their lives. And if you think that's an exaggeration, um, I will tell you it's not. From personal experience, it's absolutely not an exaggeration to say that when someone realizes their insurance company will not pay for necessary care, um, that they will choose not to get that necessary care because they can't afford it. And if insurance only works when you're healthy, what is the point? And we sit here and we dance on this fence as Americans. Is health insurance a right or a privilege? And today, I think everyone would say it's a right, but the effect is that it's a privilege. And my brother is here, and we both have had our healthcare struggles. We are all both intimately involved in the healthcare industry, being children of doctors. I was a healthcare CEO for a number of years, And some of the things that I had to witness as a healthcare CEO made me so sad and made me sick to my stomach. And it was one of the things that made me proud of the way we did it in the pharmacy, is that we're here to help people. Period, end of story. And insurance company be damned. And they're, by the way, they will shut you down if you say insurance company be damned, but I don't work there anymore, so it's not my problem. But back in the day, uh, we made a lot of effort to help people who didn't have a lot, and did a lot of work to help people who didn't have a lot, and help people afford their medication, help people get insurance, help people get coverage, help people find ways of getting the medications that they need. And it just shouldn't have that just shouldn't be the way it is. And so today I wanted to tell some stories about my interactions the with the healthcare space, with doctors, both male, female. So this isn't like, me picking favorites. Dr. D really was it was and is the best that I've had. I had a fertility specialist that was also phenomenal. Um, but I had to pay for those out of pocket. Anytime I've had to interact with the rank and file healthcare system, go to an ER, go to a regular doctor, it's been a pretty awful experience. And then on top of it, a pretty awful experience um, with insurance. Now, I will say I've had some doctors save my life. So the doctoring themselves, some doctors are more competent than others. I've had doctors literally save my life, perform emergency surgery and keep me alive and save my life. And I am so grateful to them. I'm not so thrilled with that for saving my life. The insurance company said, I don't care. You saved her life the wrong way. We're not going to pay. And so, my brother can attest to some of this. So we'll tell some stories. I'll probably go from beginning to end of some of these stories. So they'll start with childhood and get more recent, but I'll let my brother tell, maybe his story first.
Ah, well, okay. My story. Well, I mean, we have to begin with the fact that our dad was a doctor. Our mom was in the medical field as well, and that, to begin with, already set us up where we couldn't partake in the usual way. So when we got sick, part of the idea was that we already had a doctor at home, and he would be the one who was going to treat us. But then I wonder, okay, well, why would that be the case? Part of it is that our dad was a very good doctor.
Phenomenal ER doc. Let me be very clear.
Phenomenal,
I've said enough things about our parents, and we love our parents. There is no animosity here. My dad is a phenomenal doctor. You have no idea, and I don't think I can even count on two hands, probably 2 hands, 2 feet, and other hands and feet, how many times we've literally been stopped in the middle of the street as a family with someone running up to us going, your father saved my life. As an ER doc, your father saved my life. And when we used to visit him in the hospital, in the ER, he was a doctor first. He did not care about administration. He didn't care about insurance. He didn't care about how much time he took. He cared about his patients, period. And he was in it for all of the right reasons.
And people loved him.
Yeah.
People loved him. Every time I was in the hospital where he worked, the nurses loved him. The other doctors loved him. I don't know about the administrators, though.
They hated him.
Exactly.
They hated him and loved him because at the end of the day, he was probably inexpensive. relative to his peers, he worked harder than anybody else, handled more cases than anybody else, complained less than anybody else, worked every holiday under the sun. So,
Hmm.
you knew he was coming, you knew he was reliable. There was a point where, he had two bad knees, and the whole hospital administration got together to buy him a scooter or something. But he couldn't even walk, and he showed up to work. Like, that's who he was.
So part of me wonders, though, aside from the fact that he was highly skilled and probably the best doctor uh, amongst most of the doctors that he knew, but I wonder part of it could have also been that it was free. Having him treat us was free.
Hmm.
Because going to get scans and tests and going through all this insurance process, not that we didn't have insurance, but still that costs money and time and effort. And so I feel like that was part of the reason why we had almost no access to hospitals
Yeah.
outside of visiting our father. And so then that's a necessary backstory to the process for me, because growing up, I was off and on sick in various ways. I couldn't really determine why or what was going on. I was a little kid. I just dealt with it. I remember when I was like 10, 11, I had intense difficulty breathing that was not addressed. I worried about it. I was like, I wonder, is this normal? Just randomly wheezing, I guess it's normal because people hear me and nobody said anything. So I guess this is fine. And over the years, when through middle school and getting into high school, it had gone away. So I forgot about it. But then what came about was new symptoms. Symptoms where my brain would just start shutting down. And I would be going into a class, we would have a test, and that day, despite how much I may have studied, I would bomb the test because I just couldn't think right. I either couldn't read the questions the way that they were worded properly, or I literally couldn't think at all. I remember one time just staring at a test in chemistry. It's a subject I was great at. And I was looking at this test going, I don't know what any of this means. And not in the sense that I didn't know what chemistry was. I didn't know what these words meant. I couldn't even read them and process what I was reading.
You would have been a perfect candidate for House. You should have been an episode of House. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Because every time that you go on House, there's only two, perineal plastic syndrome or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Those are the first two of every episode that they try.
Well, the obligatory, is it lupus? It's never lupus, right? But
by the way, it also wasn't lupus.
Exactly. But these symptoms, they just kept progressing over time. I remember when I was a senior in high school, I was failing. Like this is just the way things were. I wasn't going to graduate. And in order to graduate, I needed to get a D in my English class. And so my mom and my sister, they sat down with me and they're like, okay, we'll help you do this. We talked with your teacher. She said, if you do all this work, then she'll pass you. And I remember my sister, who she was in college at this point, so she had come back home to help me. And she's looking at these essays. She's looking at the writing prompts, and she asked me, okay, look, just write this sentence. Just let's start. Write a sentence. And I would just stare blankly at her, going, I don't know how to do that. I cannot form words in a sentence structure for you. And she thought that I was just being lazy, right? Like, you do the work. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to make a sentence anymore. And I was like, what? I don't know what's going on. I thought that I was just stupid, like off and on, like maybe I'm having lapses of complete brain deadness. And I'm like, okay, I must be dumb. This is just weird. I don't know. Sometimes my brain works. Sometimes I'm dead. I don't know. I got really depressed about it. It was only because of the gracious help from my mom and my sister that I was able to graduate high school. But I had no desire to go to college because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, I don't want to go to college and then fail out because I'm stupid. So a whole year went by where I just sat at home doing absolutely nothing. And finally, my brother and sister, they come, they visit, they say, look, hey, you got to try. What do we got to do to get you to try? And I was like, okay, I mean, I'll put out some applications, fine, and I got into UNF, and I went to where my brother was. He had recently graduated from med school, and he was going to Jacksonville. So I was like, okay, I'll go where he's going. But the thing about college was all my worst fears came true.
Yeah.
It kept progressively getting worse and worse. The frequency was higher, where my brain would shut down. Eventually, by the time I was 21, I was sleeping 18 hours a day. And all of these things, nobody seemed to care about. No amount of me telling my dad what was going on mattered. No amount of telling my friends who had doctor parents mattered. Everybody was like, man, that you should just stop being friends with that guy. He's so lazy.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't care. He just doesn't want to, do anything. So I'm sitting around going, okay, am I a failure? Am I just lazy? Am I just stupid? What could possibly be going on here? And an entire year went by where I failed every class. And I was at my wit's end. I was like, I don't understand. And I remember taking classes that I had an A in. Linear algebra, for instance. I took that class. I was doing great. And then the final exam came, and just like in chemistry in high school, I couldn't read it anymore. And it got a 0. And I went from an A to an F because that final was worth 40% of the grade. And you lose 40%, that's all of it. And what am I supposed to say to my teacher? Like, hey, I'm sick. I didn't know if I was sick. I just thought I was stupid. I remember other tests that I took where I walked out going, man, I crushed that test. I got an A for sure. And then I would get the test back, and it was like a 5% because of some partial credit. And when I would read the answers I put down and then reread the questions, I'm like, these weren't the questions I answered. I don't know where these questions came from, but I answered different questions. I remembered the questions in my head that I was answering, and they weren't what I had read. And so that kind of thing freaked me out.
Right.
But then finally, it took seizures, convulsions for anyone to finally say, Well, I want maybe
you have a
Maybe.
problem. And I witnessed the seizures firsthand, where you seized up, and I remember calling 911. I like It was one of the scariest things ever. And by the way, like when you even when you're this sick, a lot of times you go to the doctor or you go to the ER, they're just there to stabilize you. So they
Hmm.
stabilize you and send you home. So they're not really there to figure out what's wrong with you.
Right. And it's easy to think in listening to my story. Okay, well, yeah, but that's just because your dad was a doctor, and so you didn't bother going to the hospital. And had you gone, it would have been fine. But that's not the case. So at UNF, they had psychologists, they had doctors, nurses, they had counselors, and I would go all the time because I was depressed out of my mind about failing everything. And I would specifically show up during one of these symptoms I was having just to say, go get the person, just tell them, look, 2 minutes, stop what you're doing, come out here and just look at me. Like I can't talk. Like it was like I was mumbling, like I couldn't even put words together properly. I'm like, this is what I've been talking about. Look at it. They didn't care. These are trained doctors. These were trained professionals. They also were like, oh, yeah, I don't know what's going on with you, but it's fine. You're just depressed. Again, that constant depression diagnosis. I'm like, how is this related to depression? I don't understand. Finally, with the convulsions, people started to say, okay, something's wrong. But the thing about that moment was they still didn't think that it was related to any of the other symptoms. They're just like, oh, well, you have something, but all the rest of it was just still you just being lazy. And I'm like, all right. Finally, didn't my dad takes me to see neurologists. Okay, that I'm excited. I'm like, all right, we're gonna figure it out. It's gonna be great. Except it wasn't great at all. They never listened to me. They didn't care what my stories were or what I was trying to explain to them. They had one goal in mind. Did I have epilepsy? Because again, they only cared about the convulsions and seizures, and that usually means epilepsy. They didn't care about any other symptom. So they ran the tests. I came back clean. I didn't have epilepsy, and they quit. They're like, I don't know what's wrong with your son. I think it's in his head.
And we have no interest in finding out.
Yeah, they gave me a psychology diagnosis. I forget the name of it, but my sister had it when she was a kid, where
Conversion
like,
reaction syndrome.
That's what it was. Conversion disorder, right? And I was like, what? No, that's not right. And I knew it wasn't right because I know psychology, and I knew that the whole thing about conversion disorder is that, for instance, if you went blind and they shined light in your eyes would still be working and react to the light. I literally had things not working.
Right.
I had blood in my ears. I would spit up blood. Right? Like these are real things. And they sent me away. They quit on me.
And I would say part of that, one, and like, not to bring up as race is always an excuse, and it's not, but race plays a role in this, that you're a lot less likely to get a proper diagnosis if you're not fair skinned. Even when you're wealthy, you think, oh, it doesn't matter. Even when you're wealthy, if you're not fair skinned and you walk in the room, they do not put the effort in to diagnose you. And on top of that, over the years, so my brother was always really, really skinny. And then there was a period of time where he gained a bunch of weight. And so when you go to the doctor and you're
around 10.
Yeah, when you're overweight, it's the same thing that happens a lot to women too, but it goes, let's deal with your depression. So, oh, you're sad? Yeah, I'm sad because my life is falling apart because I'm sick. No, no, no. What I heard is that you're sad, so you need Lexapro. You need
Mhm.
Zoloft. Let's do that first. And then you're also overweight. So let's get you, if you lose the weight, you'll stop being sad and you'll stop being sick. Everything has to do with your weight, or it has nothing, or we have no interest in helping you at all. And so I don't know what kind of labs they were running over all of this time, because there actually was an explanation for all of it.
Right. They didn't care about any of the rest of it. For instance, I had critically low B12 levels. They didn't care. They didn't think it could possibly be related either, right? They're like, whatever. That's it. They handed me some pills, right? But it was when they had given up on me that I gave up. I was like, well, it's over. I can't live like this forever. Like, there's no way. And it was only because of our dad that I'm alive. But what makes me upset about that situation is that my dad, again, because he was a doctor, he could look at all the labs, and he looked at all the CT scans, CAT scans, MRIs, everything. He looked over all of it, and he pulled me aside and he told me, hey, I see in this scan that you have this really bad sinus infection, in your sinus cavity and near your brain and everything. And I don't know if it's related to anything. It probably isn't, but I can at least give you some antibiotics and treat it, right? Like, maybe that'll alleviate some of your suffering. He gave me B12 shots and things like that. And all of a sudden I started feeling better. Just like that. And I mean within 2 days. Within 2 days, it was like I was a brand new person. And I'm looking at my dad at that point. I mean, on one hand, I'm excited. I'm like, I'm alive. And then on the other hand, I'm like, but wait, you're telling me that these doctors knew I had these problems and they were so easy to treat? Even if they weren't, again, even if it had nothing to do with the convulsions, they didn't even care to treat it? What's an antibiotic prescription to a doctor? Like, they hand them out like candy, and they couldn't be bothered to say, hey, we noticed this thing. Why don't we treat that too? No.
No, they're just like, sinus infection. Just let him have it. Who cares?
Yeah. They didn't care. Because once their one diagnosis was ruled out, the rest of my medical issues were not their concern.
Well, and also you weren't showing all of the major signs of infection, right? Like, you didn't have fever, you didn't have high white count, you didn't have all of these other things that would have said, hey, we have a infection run amok here.
Sure. That, I mean, but that's where I also would say, yeah, but what about all the blood in my face?
Well, and so that's what's interesting about your particular situation, because had you maybe, because you must have gotten sick, and we remember it as a family. We went to India. We came back from India, and you were not the same. We remember it. It like plain as day. We went to India, and you were not the same. And then it was like one of these things where and we look back on it, is an untreated infection for 20 years. What happens to you? Now, some people it kills. Some people it just kind of finds roots in your brain and in your face. And yes, by the way, when he says blood in his ears, he's not exaggerating. It was like boils. It looked like burns in his ears. And so they would open up and bleed. He still has the scar tissue from it. And we were like, what is going on with your ears? What is going on with your ears? But when you go and you take a lab and there's no indication of infection, and again, I think they gave you something topical for it or something, like it was fungal. I remember you getting eardrops at some point for something like that. Um, but it was the constant ignoring of I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And then you get antibiotics. And I remember you were on antibiotics. How long were you on antibiotics for?
Well, at that point, I ended it 5 years.
Yeah,
Off and on, every 2 months, I needed another round for 5 years. And not just like, oh, your typical 2-week courses. I would go on for an entire month at a time, because it kept coming back. You can't have an infection for 20 years and then just say, well, it's going to go away quickly.
Yeah, and think about it. If you got that infection and it is an upper respiratory infection and it stayed in your head, that infection is all in your brain. So everything, because all of your symptoms were lungs and up. But then that people don't realize that's going to impact your nervous system, that's going to impact your cognitive function, it's going to impact your metabolism, it's going to impact everything, because when you have an infection sitting in and around your brain, this is the result of it. And you can hear the story and you can blame our parents, but you can blame me, you can blame a lot of people, like we didn't know. By the way, nobody knows. We do this to people today as a society, that when something is impacting the brain or the psyche, we immediately go, something's wrong with that guy. We need to get away from them, not like we need to help him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting how interacting with the healthcare, even past that, when it's the job of the healthcare industry to find a reason. And when the reason isn't easy, when the reason isn't right in front of their face, that they're not willing to try anything, they're not willing to do anything, they just go, well, we can't figure it out. So if we can't figure it out in all of our intelligence and wisdom, then you must just be crazy, and there's no reason to help a crazy person. That's what I find also very strange. Like, oh, it must just be in your head. Go home. We don't want to deal with you.
Right. And another thing that those neurologists had found was that, and I'd mentioned it in I think episode 2 of this podcast about ADHD ? They're like, I mean, he might. It's possible. Did they explore it further? Did they even remotely care to talk to me about it? No. Didn't matter. Again, it wasn't epilepsy. Doesn't matter. But okay, this story continues, because one could say, well, okay, this is just a story about how doctors are bad. How people in the medical field, they don't care and they don't want to help you. But the thing is, at that point, I managed to find a couple of doctors who were pretty decent. And then I turned 26. And when you turn 26, you lose access to your parents' health insurance. And at that point, from 26 all the way till last month, I couldn't see the doctors who cared. My parents would find like a doctor in Gainesville that, after much trial and effort from them to find him, they would say, oh, well, we found one doctor who's pretty good, but doesn't take your insurance. And okay, fine. I'd go see that doctor once or twice, but you can't keep going forever, right? Like it's expensive. So the whole concept of being out of network, they don't cover you, you have the wrong type of Florida Blue. They take Florida Blue, just not your type.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I don't know what that means. What do you mean by types? Which type was I supposed to have? I don't know these things.
And they can't tell you.
Right.
We're like, what insurances do you take? Well, we can't tell you.
And it's like, I thought Florida Blue was...
I don't know.
Isn't Florida Blue Florida Blue? I didn't understand. No, absolutely not.
No.
There's letters like PPO and HMO and all these letters that I didn't understand what any of that
But
meant.
even
I'm
when you
like,
think you're getting the PPO and the open access source or whatever, and then you go and try to use it, and they go, "Yeah, no, we don't take that one. No, we don't
mm-hmm,
take that one either." Well, what about this one? No, we don't take that one either. But we do take Florida Blue. Well, which one? Well, we can't tell you.
right. So I kept losing access to doctors, and I remember because again, the infection kept coming back. At a certain point, I quit. I was like, this is not going to happen. We're not going to figure out all the other issues that I'm having, and I'll just live with this the rest of my life. Like whatever's remaining, I'll just live with, because it was impossible to find a doctor who cared. It was impossible to find a doctor in network. It was impossible to have the right insurance. I kept changing insurances. Couldn't find the right one.
Or the insurance changes on you, right? So even when you have the same insurance and you have a doctor today, and then you have a doctor Jan 1, they go, no, now they're out of network. Or this could happen even in the middle of the year where you have a doctor and then they say, nope, we don't take it now. Or no, they're not covered now.
Yeah. So on both sides of it, I just could not get any help. And you cannot tell a doctor, hey, I need you to just run this battery of tests here, and let's just rack up the cost and figure this out. Because they also, to the credit of some of these doctors, they're like, look, you can't afford that.
Right.
The insurance won't cover it, and we know this would bankrupt you. So we can't do anything for you. And this is what, Dr. D was mentioning, was the idea of being a doctor and having your hands tied. You see things that are wrong and you can't do anything about it because of insurance and other related issues. So finally, even up till last month, I just never got any help. And then finally, all of a sudden, my sister, she'll tell you her stories next, she found Dr. D. And I am extremely lucky that she found Dr. D. See, I didn't find him. I never would have found him. She found him, and then she told me about it. Finally, I got to see him. And within a month, he had already figured out several issues. He's like, all right, well, you got this issue. Let's work on that one. Okay, let's get these lab tests. Oh, you've got this issue. Let's work on that one. But even my most recent lab tests, they showed another obvious issue, that because I have muscle weakness and I can't grow my muscles, things like that. But then there's low testosterone that came back on the test. But we can't treat it. Not yet, because of insurance. Insurance is going to require that I have low testosterone for several consecutive lab tests. And I have nothing but terror about that concept, because what if I come in right at that bottom number? So they give you a range. It's like, okay, 250 to 1,000 or something like that.
Right, the subclinical diagnosis, right?
What if I hit 250 once? Is 250 really that different from 230? It is to insurance. And I'm really afraid of that. But I have no control over it. But this is a major issue, because even recently, last year, I tried exercising for 3 consecutive months, 4 times a week, running and doing all these things. And I managed to grow from being able to run 0.3 miles to run 0.4 miles after 3 months of arduous effort, just painstaking, back-breaking effort to try to grow these muscles, and nothing. Just wouldn't do it. So I quit. I gave up. I was like, this hurts. I can't do it. So insurance is still a problem for me. Getting the answers is still hard to work out. Dr. D, he told me, like, if we do the cash route, I could treat you right now. But since we're going to do the insurance route, this is what the requirements are. It's what he was talking about on the podcast last week. He's like, look, this is what I was talking about. I have to wait before I can treat you. And that's where I'm at. This is my story, where because of a lifetime of just bad experiences, I have permanent problems. And it's hard to say how many of my issues are related to a damaged nervous system because it wasn't treated. How many issues are related to parts of my body breaking because of a 20-year-long infection? My stomach doesn't work right. My intestines don't absorb vitamins properly. I mean, I got all kinds of long-term health effects now. But even so, I don't really try to complain. I just say I'm grateful to have things start to get better. I'm grateful that I have a doctor who cares and who chose to kind of exit the merry-go-round of the current medical system so he could do these things for people. So he could help me. But the funny thing is that 1 month's worth of help on things that weren't even that hard for him to find, the last 10 years. I'm 36. From 26 to 36. Nobody could find these things. Nobody could help me. I don't understand. But I'm doing much better now. So I'm still very happy, and I'm grateful for my sister for all that she has done. And for her horror stories that led her to Dr. D. So why don't you tell us about your journey?
I'll probably give you more the Cliff's Notes version. That's too millennial. I'll give you the chat version, right? of this of these stories. And I'm going to pick out some of the worst ones. I remember, like, I already said I had to have fertility treatment because I kept having miscarriages. So I wasn't supposed, I was always told it's going to be really hard for me to have children. I have a son who, to me, I always say he was my miracle before I knew I needed them. And when I was pregnant with him, I was very, very sick. So sick. And for a lot of people, if you've never been pregnant or have never been around someone who's pregnant, and you always hear about morning sickness, right? So morning sickness, you have a little nausea, a little vomiting. Some people have it worse, so they have a lot of nausea, a lot of vomiting, and it usually lasts for about 3 months, the beginning parts of a pregnancy, and goes away. And then you just wake up one day and now you kind of get through the rest of your pregnancy feeling better. And some people don't have any morning sickness at all. And morning sickness isn't just a time of day. You don't just get sick in the morning, you get sick whenever. It can be smells, any other stimuli. So for me, from the time I was 6 weeks pregnant. So think about it. I had only really known I was pregnant for 2 weeks. And I was vomiting so constantly that I could not hold down water. And so I'm throwing up and throwing up and throwing up. I'm so sick. I'm basically on bed rest because I can't move. And I go and I get You go to your OB and you tell them, look, I'm throwing up. And they say, have some ginger, drink some tea, have ginger ale. Oh, honey, first pregnancies are tough. You'll get through the morning sickness. Just try to relax and not think about it. And you go, okay, I guess this is normal. And I could not hold down water. I would chew whatever and throw up immediately. And to the point where I was chronically dehydrated. And I'm talking about near death's door dehydrated. In the first 3 months of my pregnancy, my pre-pregnancy weight was about 110, 115, something like that. I had dropped to 100 pounds. I was losing weight very, very rapidly. And no one thought about it. No one's like, oh, stop being a baby about it. Everybody has to throw up a little bit when you're pregnant. You don't, stop being dramatic. I had a bunch of that. That was fun. Don't be dramatic about it. And I'm like, no, I can't hold down water. I can't drink. I can't take the prenatals. They're like, how dare you not take the prenatals? Are you trying to kill your baby? I'm like, I think the baby is trying to kill me. And I would look at my belly, and I was so frail and so skinny. And I remember going 3 months like that, and I was going to the ER a lot because I needed to get seen. Like I felt like I was dying. And I went to get blood work. I think it was the 3-month visit or something, and I went to get blood work, and my blood was sludge. My veins were so small, the blood would not come out. It was sludge. When I tell you I should have been dead, when your blood is a paste and not a liquidy consistency, you're dying. And so I remember the phlebotomist drawing my blood looked at me in the eye and said, "We have a problem. You need to go to the ER right now." And he pulled my husband aside and he said, "You need to take her to the ER right now. We cannot get blood out of her. There is something very, very wrong, and we can see it in her face. You need to go to the ER." And so we went to the ER, and I remember I'm in the ER, and they're like, "Yeah, her veins are tiny. We can't get a stick in." They had poked me up and down my arms, like trying to get a stick in. And they looked at my husband. "Yeah, since we can't get a line run, it looks like you're gonna have to go home." I'm dying. Like it is very obvious that I'm dying. And they're like, "Yeah, well, we tried." And then when I say up and down my arms, they tried, on the inside of the elbow and like one other place. So it's not like they tried 100 different times. And my husband at the time said, he's still my husband. I don't know why I said he's still my husband.
He said it at that
time. He said, "We are not leaving. You figure it out. We are not leaving." And what they got was a phlebotomist or someone who would do the stick, who works in the NICU. So they brought down a lady who runs lines for NICU patients, premature infants, because those are tiny, tiny veins. So they got her, and she was able to do it in one shot, like nothing. They should have had a round of applause. I don't understand. Like that woman is worth her weight in gold. And then they started slowly putting blood in me, putting fluids in me to get me rehydrated. And we had to do that more than once. But they would have let me leave. And I still go back to the doctor, and they're like, "Yeah, we keep hearing you going to the ER. You're so dramatic about this whole vomiting thing. It's just morning sickness, honey. You just got to get past it." And I was 5 or 6 months pregnant at that point. They're like, "Well, I guess it's going to last the whole pregnancy now, because should have gone away by now." And I show up at my OB's office, and finally I get to see the doctor. And the reason the doctor saw me is because I kept going to the ER. And she looked at me and she goes, "Holy shit. You're You're only ever going to see me now. You've lost a ton of weight. If you lose a pound more, you need to be inpatient. And she didn't, no one believed me about the vomiting until I literally was talking and they had me drink a little water so I could give a urine sample, and it gurgled out of my mouth as I was talking. I couldn't even get it into my stomach. It just came right back up. And she goes, "Oh my God, you're serious." I said, "Yes." What did you guys freaking think? That I wasn't serious? I've been trying to tell you for 6 months that this is it, that this is how it's been. And they go, "Oh, well, we could have put you on Zofran from 8 weeks." Zofran is what they give cancer patients for nausea. I could have been on that from 8 weeks. There was a simple solution. It has a diagnosis. It's called hyperemesis gravidarum. Princess Kate had it. She got treated. But for me, no, I get nothing until 6 months in and near death's door. Like literally, and I don't know how Ryan survived. And it was funny because we were even thinking about having an abortion because he was killing me. This pregnancy was killing me. And I remember we did some testing and everything on him came back fine. He was fine. Completely fine. Growing fine. Everything about him was fine. And I remember saying, if he's fine, I'm fine. I will figure it out. We will figure out how to get through it. I'm gonna make it. He's okay. As long as he's okay, we're okay. I'm gonna keep going. But it was a serious consideration because I was not okay. I was not okay. My husband was about to lose his unborn child and his wife at the same time. How terrifying it must have been for him, and having to fight. And they would not listen to me. You know who they listened to? Him. He had to run and throw a temper tantrum in offices to get them to even bother to listen to me or even bother to grant me an appointment. Like this is how it was. And guess what? A lot of this ER visits, thousands of dollars. They didn't cover any of that. I had to pay for that. I'm the one being dramatic. I'm the one that can't, and they can't treat me being dramatic because I'm pregnant. So I couldn't even get antidepressants. I couldn't get anything. But it was one of those things. Once I got to 6 months, they said, they put me on a cocktail of meds. I was then allowed to, consume calories without throwing up. And the plan was eat, take this, pass out before you could throw up, wake up, eat, pass out again. Like that's how it went for the remainder 2.5 months. And then at the end, I was literally begging for it to be over. And I saw my towards the end they're checking it could be like that any day now. And I'm like, can you please just smoke him out? I swear he's full baked. Just smoke him out. And Ryan must have heard me because that night I went into labor. Like my water broke and I was like, oh my God. So people think like when your water breaks, you have this gush. It's like on TV, like, ooh, look at all that water. No, I thought I was incontinent now. All these problems. Like I had so many problems between pain and nausea and, all and not vomiting, not just nausea, but vomiting and all of the issues that I had. I'm like, sure, let's go to the ER because I can't hold my pee now. Like, absolutely. This sounds awesome. I want to see those faces. And so it took me 2 hours to figure out that it wasn't pee, that it didn't just have a bladder issue because I kept going to the bathroom and releasing fluid. And I got a towel. I laid on my tile floor because I'm not going to do that on carpet. I ain't made of money. So I laid on the tile floor. I'm like, if I do nothing and water comes out, I must be in labor. And I remember I'm like, okay, I figured out that my water broke and I'm in labor. And I went to wake up my husband because it was almost midnight at that point. It was 11 o'clock at night. And I said, I think I'm having a baby. And he goes, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. I Googled it. I've been Googling for the last 2 hours. He's like, oh, wait, when your water breaks, you only have like 4 hours to get to the hospital. I'm like, well, it took me 2 hours to realize I wasn't crazy. And I didn't want to go back to the ER and have those people look at me again like you again. And by the way, we showed up at the ER, and of course, they know us now, and they're looking at me going, you again. And I go, I think I'm in labor. They're like, we'll see about that. And they bring me back, and there's a test for amniotic fluid when you water breaks, so they know it's not pee. And, and they do the test, like, oh crap, you are, and then they rush me up. Like, even when I tell them I'm having a baby, I could have been crowning, and they would have been looking at me going, are you sure? Are you sure you're having a baby? So that was one. Like, it was 9 months of hell, and then I proceeded to have more miscarriages. I remember one, I was losing the baby. I knew I was about 8 or 9 weeks pregnant at that point, and all pregnancy tests confirmed it, and I just started bleeding profusely. And we went to the ER, and I'm like, is there any way to stop it? Right? Like, I thought maybe I'm miscarrying. Is there a way to maybe stop me from bleeding and so I don't miscarry? They do the test, and they're like, yeah, no, you're not 9 weeks, you're 4 weeks or 5 weeks. You're not miscarrying. You don't know what date you got pregnant. And not to be too graphic, I know exactly what effing date I got pregnant. Like, it's not, there was no other opportunities. There weren't multiple options. I know exactly when I got pregnant. And so I knew I was 9 weeks. And they're like, no, you're only 5 weeks. And so they discharged me. And as I'm walking out the door, they're like, good luck on your pregnancy. And I went home and I miscarried. I lost that baby. I went from 9 weeks, and the hormone levels only showed a 5-week fetus. I was losing. I had already lost my pregnancy when I got there. And of course, then the ER doc is like, yeah, good luck with you. You're stable. Of course, you're bleeding out. You're pregnant. And good luck with your pregnancy. Not telling me, oh, I'm so sorry for your miscarriage. No consideration for me whatsoever. I'm bawling my eyes out. And they're like, honey, it's fine. Your pregnancy will progress just fine. I'm like, no, it will not. It isn't. I am not. And even if it was, I'm bleeding. Even if I was 5 weeks, I'm bleeding. I'm not going to be pregnant for much longer. And then, so that's like doctors. Then I went and saw a fertility specialist, and she was, no, I saw the fertility specialist after the last miscarriage, which was the ectopic, and that's probably the worst story I'll tell. The worst horror story I'll tell. I'm a cat with 9 lives. My brother doesn't realize this, but I've been in and out of the hospital since I was 13. I have problems. This body just don't work. It just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And I have been knocking on death's door since I was 13 years old. Like, I just keep finding a way to survive. Don't know why. I probably don't have that many more near-death experiences left in me that I can survive. But the last story I'll tell is the story of the ectopic, because this is the insurance story. This is that story, because insurance nearly cost me my life and then nearly bankrupted me after people saved my life. When you have insurance, and anybody knows, you go to the ER or you get admitted into the hospital or anything happens. Oh yeah, the hospital's in network, but the radiologist isn't. Or the hospital's in network, but the doctor isn't, or the ultrasound tech isn't, or whatever it is that they did in there. Part of it was covered and part of it wasn't. And so you start to get gun shy. And as somebody who's been to the hospital a lot, I have racked up a significant amount of medical debt that I've had to overcome in my life. And now I'm married. I have a child. I don't want to put my family through the pain of bankruptcy when, like, I don't need to go to the hospital for cramps. Like, I don't need to risk a $5,000 bill for something that is silly, and I just need to deal with it. Maybe it's just hydration. Maybe I just need to drink water. Who wants to go and get a $5,000 bill because you need more vitamin D? Like, who wants to deal with that? And that was my concern, having all of these bills from the time I was 13 to now, just the expense of being sick. And my credit was effed my entire young life. It was so expensive. And so I became very gun shy. And of course, when you go to the you access healthcare and they keep telling you you're crazy and stupid and you don't know your own body, and you keep going there and racking up these bills, and all you hear is you just don't know what you're talking about. You start to feel like, okay, why even go? They're just going to judge me, and they're not going to help me, and they're not going to take care of me. And so I got pregnant again after that miscarriage. I probably had one or two more after that, but I got pregnant again. And because I kept miscarrying, it got to the point where I didn't want to know. And I'm not going to cry. I'm trying not to cry. I didn't want to know because I wanted a baby so bad. I wanted children so bad. My brother knows this. I've been a mom since I was 3 years old. I wanted kids. And I so desperately wanted to give my son a sibling. I was trying so hard. And I'm a really healthy person. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't do anything. Doing everything right. And so and when you're pregnant and you get to a place where you keep losing it after you have a chance to get attached, right? Right when you're about to tell everybody you're pregnant, you lose it. So you don't want to be attached anymore because I'm just going to lose it anyway. So this time I didn't want to know, and so I didn't take a pregnancy test. I'm like, what's the point? I'm just going to lose it anyway. And I ended up um it was around work, and I remember driving around and I was so confused. I was like, I don't know where I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's going on with me. And I remember feeling crampy. Like, my stomach hurts. And I didn't know what it particularly was, but I remember being confused, and I had such a busy long day. And it was one of those 16-hour work days. It was absolutely nuts. And I get home, and my husband was traveling for work, and so I get home and my son is home, and I had help watching him, and we're together. And I wake up in the morning, and I'm like, I'm in so much pain, an unbelievable amount of pain. And I look around, and my son is still sleeping, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I called my son's nanny, who I was very fortunate to be able to afford a nanny back then. I was CEO back then, so I could afford the nanny, and thank God for being that fortunate. Not everybody gets that. I was lucky enough, and I had neighbors who, if she couldn't come, I had neighbors who cared about us who would have come. And I called her and I said, something's wrong. Can you come any earlier? And she usually got there like 7:30 so I could get ready and go to work. And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm really in a lot of pain. And if you could just come any early. And she said, oh, absolutely. I'm going to come. And I started looking up, and I started calling, my doctor, gynecologist, primary, whoever would pick up the phone. Obviously, there's the messaging service. And of course, when they say you can't reach anybody, they say, go to the ER. Just don't wait, go to the ER. And I'm sitting here going, well, if it's just cramps, I don't want to go to the ER. I can't go to the ER for menstrual cramps. That's silly. And then I'm trying to figure out, well, what hospitals in network, and the insurance had changed, and I don't know where to go. I don't know if I'm supposed to go to an urgent care. I don't know if I'm supposed to make an appointment with the doctor and see them first thing in the morning at 9 a.m. Or what do I do? How do I mitigate the cost of this? Like, I can't be, and my husband's not home. Like, of course, like, I don't want to be, oh, really? You couldn't wait till I got home? The cramps were that bad? Just take some Midol and keep it moving. So I'm researching, and I get up and I go to the bathroom, and I go pee, And as I'm walking back from the bathroom to the bed where my son is sleeping, because we co-slept, I lost consciousness. I fell over in the room and fell into the closet. And I must have been unconscious, fully unconscious, for 10 to 15 minutes at least, because that's how long it takes for Mel to get there. And I know that for Mel to get there, it I talked to her like 2 minutes before or something, before going to the bathroom. And then by the time I got back, I think she was just, by the time I came to, she was just getting there. So that I estimate is 10, 15 minutes. And the reason I came to is because I heard my son screaming, "Mommy, I need you." I don't know why I heard him. And I told him that story recently, and he started crying. He's like, "Thank you so much for telling me the story," because he realized, I'm like, "You've saved my life more than once already. You being okay in my belly kept me going, and you screaming for me." He was 3 years old, or 2.5, something like that, and he was screaming for me. He saw me fall, and he screamed and screamed from the bed, "Mommy, I need you." And somehow I heard him, and I got up. I went to the bed, I scooped him up, and Mel showed up at the bedroom door, and she looked at me and she's like, "All right, let's go to the ER." I'm like, "Well, I'm still waiting for someone from the doctor's office to call me back. I don't know where to go. I'm looking at my insurance card. I don't know where to go. I don't know how much is this going to cost. What's the best place to go? I don't know." And she looks at me and she's like, "No, we have to go to the hospital, and we have to go right now." And she took Ryan from me, and I couldn't understand why she took Ryan from me. I'm holding him, and she took him, and we all get into the car, and she drives me to the ER, and I'm walking in. She's like, "Do you need a wheelchair?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I'm walking at this point." And we walk into the ER, and they say, "Do you need a wheelchair to bring you back?" And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm walking just fine." And she looks at them and she goes, "No, she needs." And Mel, God bless her, my son's nanny, most wonderful woman in the world. I love her to death. She's family forever. Um, she used to be a nurse, and she goes, "No, she needs a wheelchair." And so they bring a wheelchair around, and I'm like, so confused at this point. I'm like, I'm talking, walking, it's fine. They bring me back, they do some tests. Um, they say I'm pregnant 7 weeks by the blood tests, right? So I haven't done an ultrasound yet. And they order the ultrasound, and Mel's looking at me going like, "I'm so sorry." And I'm still not understanding her. I don't understand what she means by "I'm sorry," but she goes, "I'm so sorry." And I'm just hearing now that I'm 7 weeks pregnant. And they bring me back to the ultrasound, and as this poor woman is trying to do the ultrasound, and it's a wand that they rub over your belly, right? Like anybody that's had an ultrasound, it's a wand over your belly when you're pregnant. I am screaming in pain. The loudest screams a person can scream. And I remember trying to breathe through it, going, and I'm telling this woman, "I am so sorry. I don't know why I'm screaming. It hurts so much, but I'm going to get control of myself. I swear, I'm so sorry. Let me get control of myself. It's going to be okay. I'm so sorry that I'm doing this. I need to stop being dramatic. I can do this. Just keep going. Do what you got to do." Cause she kept looking at me like, "Do you need me to stop?" I'm like, "No, just finish. Do what you're doing. I'm sorry." I kept apologizing. And she looked terrified. I thought it was because I was screaming my eyes out. Like I could not have been screaming any louder. And it was like, "Oh my God, you need to dial it back." Like she thought, like, "This is not serious. Stop it." And they bring me back, and I'm sitting in the room, and I can see doctors scrambling in my room, and they called an OB consult, and the OB consult going, and I will never forget, because I thought it was the funniest thing ever. In the middle of the ER, this OB consult shows up, and he starts screaming, going, "Why the fuck did you page me? This person needs to be in emergency surgery right the fuck now." Like, he's cursing. There is no reason why I'm here. And well, they're like, well, but the insurance, you need to validate the pregnancy and document this and this and this, and that you need to code it, and we can't take her to emergency surgery until you do this billing coding thing for insurance. And so he's screaming like, you can't fucking code an ectopic? Like, what the fuck? And they're like, well, it's not just an ectopic. And he's looking at this lab and he's like, and so then he goes over the computer and he's typing whatever he has to type. I still don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And then finally someone comes in, they're like, okay, you need, okay, you're 7 weeks pregnant. It's an ectopic. Your fallopian tube has ruptured. Your fallopian tube has ruptured, and you're going to hear now, my son has come home from school, and my dog is barking, and life is about to begin at the Mars household. I'm okay. So where was I? What was the last thing I said? I don't remember.
Well, you were telling the story about the doctor.
So he does his coding thing. They come in, they tell me, okay, you have an ectopic, your fallopian tube has ruptured, you've been bleeding out. And so it was clear that I've been bleeding out for 24 hours. So when I first felt that pain a day ago, because I don't want to be seen as weak and stupid and I can't go to the doctor for menstrual cramps. When I first felt that pain the day before and was so confusing, I was internally bleeding and was bleeding out for a full 24 hours. And so what I didn't know, and what everyone else can see is that I was ghost white. When I lost consciousness in my house, I should have died. There was no reason I should have woken up from that. And if I had arrived at the ER any later, life. So if I had arrived at the ER any later, and if I had gotten into surgery even an hour later, I would have died. And that's only the first part with me worrying about what insurance would do, not what they actually did. Because at the end, so I have emergency surgery, they have to give me a lot of blood, both in the OR and after. And they admitted me. And so I get admitted, and I think I was there for a day or two after the surgery because, again, I should have been dead. Can you guys go outside? Do you mind? Okay. So they admitted me, and because that's the appropriate protocol that you do after emergency surgery when someone has lost enough blood to be dead. You don't just let them walk out the door. So apparently, according to insurance, ectopic pregnancy surgeries are supposed to be outpatient. And so because they admitted me, they were not going to pay for any of it. Because they're like, it was not medically necessary for me to have gone through what I went through in the emergency room, or for me to have done the surgery as an emergent surgery, or for me to have been admitted post-op. Because ectopic pregnancies, the surgery for that is very simple, and it happens outpatient. So denied. Then they do the peer review, the peer-to-peer conversation where you're supposed to be talking to a doctor. You're not talking to a doctor who's designed to actually approve anything. You're talking to somebody who's supposed to listen to you. The doctor talks to another doctor at the insurance company. Also denied. Also, nothing was pre-authorized. So we didn't pre-authorize the amount of blood you gave her. You should have contacted us. We can only approve 2 pints or whatever it was that was emergency loss. The rest of it was not medically necessary. Again, all of the stuff that I went through, all of the life-saving measures that were absolutely medically necessary for me to be here and talking to you, the insurance company goes, no, no, this is not medically necessary and we're not paying for it. And it took a year of fighting, with insurance company to get it paid for. And we're talking no less than $100,000 of a bill.
Wow.
So enough to ruin credit, enough where I would never be able to buy a house, enough to destroy your life. And then you go, well, maybe you shouldn't have saved my life, because at least then the insurance company wouldn't be out a dollar. And by the way, they don't pay $100,000. To them, what they actually ended up paying, we learned this from Dr. D last week, they don't pay that number. We don't pay that number. They pay some percentage of that. But like, all logic goes out the window. All logic goes out the window when you're dealing with insurance company, because they're there to deny it. And so everything that I had feared of going to the hospital, how much it's going to cost, how much of the financial burden it's going to be to my family, was realized. Bill after bill after bill kept showing up at the house. And I would call the surgeon and I would call the hospital. And it was one of the funniest things, because they're like, normally you don't get a lot of sympathetic ears at the hospital. They're like, well, that's the bill. They were so nice. They're like, this is the most egregious denials we have ever had in our careers. Like, when I'm talking to the billing people, we don't understand this at all. Everything we did for you was absolutely medically necessary. There's no reason for this. It's so, like, everything's documented. You know what they ended up having to do? And this was a year later. They sent photos, live photos and video of the surgery, of them suctioning out all the blood that had filled my internal cavity from my lungs to my knees. That's what did it. That's what finally got the approval, is that they had to prove the surgery was as dire as it was, with, like, graphically. So somebody approving, my surgery had to sit there and was like, nah, this doesn't seem that serious, until they literally saw my body opened up and it covered in red. Like, you couldn't see the organs. It's just covered in red. That's what they go, oh yeah, I guess it was serious. I guess we will approve it now. But I don't even think they approved all of it. I think the hospital ended up having to write off some of my admission. Some of them having to observe me post-op so I didn't die. Like, can you imagine the malpractice suit that they just send me home after a surgery like that and I die at home? Right? So it's like, do I just let go of this little bit of money because they didn't approve some of me staying at the hospital after it? And that's the healthcare system, right? Like, that's the healthcare system. That's what we have. And for anybody going, well, we can't have universal healthcare because that's socialism. Like, honestly, I'm so over that argument at this point. Like, anybody who's actually had to deal with the healthcare system, anybody, and we're not just talking about people who are lazy and fat, because obviously there's no laziness. Like, you could get cancer at any point. You could need help at any point. You could get hit by a bus at any point. Like, those are all random acts. The body fails at times, regardless of how well or poorly you treat it. And we sit there and we go, yeah, it's perfectly normal for you to need a GoFundMe when you've got cancer. It's perfectly normal for you to file for bankruptcy because you get diabetes. And they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't get diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is genetic. Like, peanut allergies, those are genetic. Like, these things are genetic. You don't get to pick. And so many people, like, when your kids have leukemia and the parents lose their jobs and they lose their insurance and now they can't afford to get treatment for their kids. Like, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And we're at a place now where it's so bad that we don't feel bad for an insurance CEO getting shot in the street. And honestly, I didn't feel bad either because he and his policies like his, the reason that that was denied. Like he's the reason that people would die. People would go, well, I can't go to the hospital because I can't afford the bankruptcy that
Mhm.
that this would cause. Just suck it up and deal. We're okay. And the healthcare system is not designed to actually find answers. It's designed to move you through because nobody's going to pay for it. Like healthcare is a right. We need to start coming up to that healthcare is a right. And yes, I understand it's complicated to pay for. There's no perfect answer. And I wish people would understand that with healthcare, there's no set it and forget it. You can't just walk in and say, this is the policy, and now we never have to touch healthcare ever again in our lives. You got to constantly be looking at it every year. You know, it takes entire teams of congressmen, doctors, hospitals, and actuaries, and whoever else needs to work on this. It takes a lot of people, a lot of manpower. Hell, maybe this is a problem for AI to solve, but we probably should get to a place where we're all okay collectively paying into a system so we all can go to see a doctor and we all can access healthcare without freaking being afraid.
Mhm.
Like we're not all going to just make a run on the healthcare system. Going to the hospital is annoying. Going to the doctor is annoying. Nobody wants to lose a half a day to do it. But we do it when we wait till it's like years in the making. We wait till we're near death. And that's why it's so expensive. Like if we could
Mhm.
go and you say, oh, well, preventative care is free. Yeah, not when you have to change doctors every 6 months. Not when you change jobs and then you have to get a new insurance and then or the year changes and you have to get a new insurance or something happens and you lose your job and you have no insurance. It doesn't need to be that way. Like you think, oh, you can go preventative for I would say a crazy amount of people in the United States. Healthcare is just so insecure. Most people don't have secure access to healthcare year after year, day after day. And and so we look at people like Dr. D who on the doctor side can cares enough to listen and tries. And then on the, giving up on insurance side, yeah, now at this point, I don't care whether insurance is going to pay for it or not. Like, I need someone to actually care whether I'm well or not. And if I have to pay for it, I'm fortunate. Thank God I'm fortunate enough to pay for it. But think about it like if it wasn't a for-profit industry, if healthcare wasn't a for-profit industry, you know how much money gets saved in the system? Because you don't have to continually drive increasing profits to shareholders. You
Mhm.
don't It shouldn't be a for-profit industry. It should be a not-for-profit industry. And all of that money that is going to drive to profits, to making sure certain people get dividends and stuff, could go to actually providing care. Like we think we have the best healthcare in the world. We actually have very poor primary healthcare. We have great acute care. We have great cancer care, great surgeons. When you're in an emergency situation, the best and brightest minds in the world are here in the United States. Everybody comes from all over the world to see our acute emergency specialists.
Well, I would want to say though that if any type of universal healthcare were to come into play, early on there would be a run on the system because there's so many people who have been sitting there just dying because they can't afford it. Right? Like that. And we have to be pragmatic. We have to understand that that doesn't mean that that's what would always happen. So a year later, 2 years later, it would normalize out. But if you freak out about that initial rush and that the initial costs from now having to treat a bunch of people who were borderline dying, because like for me, going to Dr. D now, I got a lot of problems that all at once he has to now resolve. But had it been just taken care of over time or prevented, it wouldn't have cost nearly as much. And so that is something that I want to make sure people understand about. Going from this system to another system is going to incur
Be hard.
some difficulties, but it's about what it normalizes to later. And so what my sister's talking about is it will be more cost effective in a sense later.
And I think there's a phased approach. I think there's probably hybrid approaches. There's probably better and worse approaches. There's probably a guess and check approach of figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and then next year what works and what doesn't work, and the year after what works and doesn't work. And so there is a way to do it. And I think one of the things that bothers me sometimes about how we approach the politics of this is that if we don't have the perfect solution, the answer is no solution. If we don't have, okay, you don't like universal healthcare, but you don't like this, well, we're stuck with this, let's just keep this. Maybe we try something. Like, is trying something and failing worse than what we have? They're like, okay, well, this didn't work out. At least then we know. At least then we know what doesn't work and we can try something else. But the fact that we continue to sit here and not try to make anything better is really rough. And so then you're in this position of needing doctors. And I'm hoping Dr. D is one of an ongoing trend of practitioners who have a conscience and who don't like medicine the way it is, and a trend of patients who have a conscience and don't like medicine the way it is, finding each other and advocating for each other and finding a way to break off from the system. And as best you can, just find a way to break off from the system, because the system is fundamentally broken. It is not designed to provide health care. It's designed to provide life-saving care, but it's not designed to provide health care. And I think as Americans, we deserve health care. We work really hard. Americans work really, really hard. And this nonsense of we don't work hard, work really, really hard. I think we deserve some health care in this country, one that works and one that makes people feel better. And so now you've heard our trauma dumping horror stories of healthcare. There are good stories, and Dr. D is one of them. And I have, had good experiences. My father is a phenomenal doctor. I'll say my brother is another example of a phenomenal doctor, and there are a lot of them. Don't get it twisted. There are a lot of great practitioners. Like Dr. D said, sometimes it's the system that prevents them from being as good as they want to be. So hopefully you heard some stories that make you rethink how good the system is, and whether you think about your own life experiences and now you go, okay, well, maybe you want better for yourself, and maybe you want better for your kids, or maybe you want better for your family or your loved ones, because it should get better. And I don't know anybody who gets good healthcare or great healthcare when they're actually having an issue. All of us should be trying to fight for better, I think. So on that note, and I don't know how much of this we're coming up on an hour and a half, how much of this impacts anything. I want to thank everybody for listening to it, though. If you're still listening, I know my brother, we heard recently there is more than one of you listening.
It's unacceptable.
It is unacceptable. What's funny? We tried to do this on the sly and not have anybody listen, and now we have plural, and so we both agreed that all but one of you should leave. Like, there's only room to talk to one listener at a time.
Exactly.
So, space it out. Do a sign-up sheet. Pick your episode. You might be stuck with the bad ones, but we only want to really talk to one of you at a time.
Look, that's okay. I mean, you only get one episode. I mean, you got to share with the other listeners so that it remains one. So, you did this one. Let somebody else do next one. It's
Yeah,
fine.
Yeah, you don't want to listen to us repeatedly. That seems silly.
That seems like a mistake.
Yeah, it does. And it's really going to impact the quality. I mean, this is pretty bad as it is. It's only going to get worse. You know how it is. Once you start having to mass produce it from multiple, it's going to get worse. So thank you. Thank you for listening. We really do appreciate it. I hope not to see you next week. See
Exactly.
new listener next week. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you love this episode, or if you at least didn't hate it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. And hey, share it with your friends, share it with your family. Until next time, stay bold, stay real, peace out, deuces, and keep speaking your mind. See you soon.